Imagine an industrial complex so vast, it functions as an autonomous, self-sustaining city of steel and concrete, isolated from the soft, predictable rhythms of the world outside. This is the Renault manufacturing plant in Santa Isabel, a titan of industry situated near Cordoba, Argentina. Its foundation in 1955 marked it as a critical hub, and by the early 1970s, it sprawled over hundreds of hectares, a massive, echoing labyrinth of service roads and assembly halls. The world rarely noticed Santa Isabel unless a global supply chain hiccup occurred. It was an exercise in pure function. But in September of 1972, this functional silence was breached by something profoundly unnatural. Over the course of a single terrifying week, multiple witnesses, men of routine, logic, and physical labor, each encountered the same figure, a silent, massive intruder whose mere presence seemed to twist electromagnetic fields, steal minutes from the clock, and inflict agonizing physiological trauma. This is not a ghost story. This is a forensic examination of the Santa Isabel Entity, a chilling case study in an intelligence capable of orchestrating events that fundamentally defy all terrestrial physics. To truly grasp the terror, one must understand the environment. The night shift is a psychological crucible. The majority of the machinery falls silent, leaving only the omnipresent hum of ventilation systems and the echoing footsteps of the skeleton crew. For the security personnel and maintenance workers, the world shrinks to the beam of their flashlight and the rigid schedule they must keep. There is an unspoken rule of the night shift. What you see is often just fatigue or shadow, or the mind playing tricks in the dark. This internal pressure to rationalize the strange became the entity's first weapon. The Renault plant, owned by a meticulous French multinational, demanded strict adherence to procedure, making any deviation, especially something as extraordinary as an 8-foot intruder, a threat to the established corporate order. The witnesses were disciplined, routine-driven men. Their immediate, unbidden physical collapse, therefore, speaks volumes about the force they encountered. The first crack in reality appeared in the pre-dawn solitude of September 21, 1972. Theodoro Merlo, a dedicated night worker responsible for securing the various staff areas, was making his final sweep. His routine took him to the forging section, a particularly heavy, thick-walled part of the facility. At approximately 1:40 a.m., he checked the staff changing rooms, finding everything secure. Hours later, closer to 5:40 a.m., an urgent need caused him to return. After verifying the door was still locked, a small but important detail confirming no unauthorized human had entered, he used his key and stepped inside. Merlo switched on the light nearest the entrance, which illuminated one section of the long rectangular room, leaving the far side, where the unused wash basins and lockers stood, shrouded in deep, deceptive shadow. As he moved deeper into the room toward the latrine cubicles, a silent movement in his peripheral vision arrested his attention, stopping him mid-stride. In the dark corner, sitting on the high porcelain trough basin intended for washing hands, was a figure. Merlo's initial, fleeting thought that it was a coworker was instantly overwhelmed by the visceral scale of the being. Based on its seated posture and the height of the basin, Merlo estimated its standing height to be close to 8 feet tall, a colossal anomaly. The figure was clad in a tight-fitting dark blue garment, its material so absorptive of light that it seemed to be woven from pure shadow. Its posture was unsettlingly awkward. One arm was bent at a sharp, unnatural angle, the elbow jutting aggressively outwards, with the index finger pointed vaguely toward its mouth, as if shushing a silent, unseen audience. As Merlo struggled to process the sheer size, the details of the face came into stark, agonizing focus. The features were oddly, almost geometrically precise, sharp, angular cheekbones, a pronounced triangular nose, and large, disproportionate pointed ears. Its skin was disturbingly smooth, hairless, and a ghastly, deathly pale, like fresh plaster that had never seen sunlight. But it was the eyes that triggered the catastrophic neurological response. They were mere slits, thin and slanted, entirely lacking the slightest glimmer of reflection, depth, or recognition. Merlo later defined them as utterly soulless, staring without seeing. A cold, heavy sense of dread, a true lacerating dread that bypasses fear and goes straight to existential terror, gripped him. Against his better judgment, he began to slowly step toward the figure. Then, the auditory and electrical disruption began. A sharp, minute sound, like metal tapping against glass, pierced the industrial silence. In the very same heartbeat, the electrical field warped. The light fixture directly above Merlo instantly extinguished, plunging him into unexpected darkness. As his eyes instinctively tracked the failure, the light at the opposite end of the room, positioned directly above the towering entity, violently flickered and then illuminated. In that moment of abrupt transition, the 8-foot shadow was gone. It had not moved, not stood up, but had simply dissolved from the basin. The spot where it had sat was empty. The immediate aftermath was a physiological counterassault. The initial dread was suddenly replaced by an intense, wave-like sensation of heat. Merlo's eyes welled up with involuntary tears, and he was struck by a blinding, pulsating migraine. Stumbling out into the empty hallway, the symptoms slowly subsided, leaving behind a confused man desperate to attribute the impossible to mere fatigue. But the entity was not finished. The following evening, Merlo returned to work. On the shift bus, he glanced up at the small rearview mirror above the driver. The narrow glass strip was entirely consumed by the face of the intruder. Thin, narrowed eyes stared directly back at him, sitting atop strange, deep indentations in the cheeks. He frantically checked the passengers around him. They were oblivious. The face remained unblinking for several minutes before slowly, deliberately fading away. This secondary, calculated violation of Merlo's personal space forced him to report the incident, complete with a sketch. His superiors advised silence. Merlo's remaining time at the plant was marked by minor but unsettling phenomena. Inexplicable strobe-like flickering of lights, and, most chillingly, a gap of nearly 1 hour for which he had zero memory, a forced deletion of experience. Exactly 1 week later, the entity targeted a second victim. Enrique Moreno, an administrator, relied on his motorbike and trailer to traverse the massive complex, delivering documents on the night shift. On September 27th, around 10:30 p.m., Moreno was collecting paperwork in the engineering department. The lights inside the office suddenly flashed off, then back on, accompanied by a deafening, throbbing, whirring noise, an impossible industrial sound akin to a massive turbine spinning up, though no machinery was operating nearby. He continued his route, dismissing the electrical hiccup, and headed toward the main gate. His path took him past the massive stacked columns of vehicle chassis. As he approached, he spotted the exceptionally tall, shadowy figure walking behind the metal frames. His mind, scrambling for a rational model, considered a man on stilts. But as he drew nearer, the figure turned its geometrically defined head and looked directly at him. In that instant, the electromagnetic field around the entity violently asserted itself. Moreno's motorbike engine began to sputter, choke, and fail. The wheels instantly locked. He skidded to an involuntary, paralyzed halt, positioned just meters away from the silent stranger. The proximity provided a chilling clarity. The figure's movement was horrific. Its head and arms were held rigidly in place, moving only when the entire torso pivoted. Moreno noted the ghastly, pale, hairless skin and observed a subtle green luminescence radiating faintly from the dark, one-piece suit. He saw the silver belt and thick holster, all constructed from the same unknown gleaming material. As Moreno sat paralyzed on his dead bike, a sharp, chemical, acrid smell, like ozone or burning circuitry, saturated the air. Simultaneously, an agonizing, focused pressure built explosively in his head and ears. When he tried to perform the simple, reflexive act of raising his hand to his forehead to alleviate the pain, he found his limbs were utterly heavy and unresponsive. He was experiencing a calculated, forced immobility. The figure stood there, observing. After an agonizing period, perhaps 30 seconds, it simply turned with its unnaturally stiff gait and walked off into the darkness. The instant the figure was out of sight, the electromagnetic field released its grip. The motorbike wheels instantly unlocked, the engine surged back to life, and Moreno sped toward the security office. He was in shock. The guard listened to the story and accompanied Moreno back. The entity was gone, but the physical remnants were not. Two small, perfectly rectangular indentations pressed into the hard earth where the figure had stood, and the adjacent metal chassis was inexplicably warm to the touch. This residual heat suggested a tremendous localized energy transfer had taken place. The most devastating evidence was temporal. Moreno recalled checking the time just before leaving the engineering office, 11:13 p.m. Yet, the gate guard logged his arrival at 11:30 p.m. A full 17 minutes of conscious experience were missing, unaccounted for by travel time or the short encounter itself. Furthermore, Moreno's wristwatch had stopped precisely at 11:13 p.m., and laboratory analysis later confirmed it was highly magnetized. The entity's presence had warped the electromagnetic spectrum, disabling his vehicle and seizing time. Moreno felt the lethargy and pressure into the next day, and his girlfriend confirmed he'd been mumbling about a metal man in his sleep, the trauma deeply embedding itself into his subconscious. Despite this profound assault, he returned to work the following night. He heard the chilling turbine whirring again, saw the flashing lights, and peered out to see the figure watching him from a patch of waste ground before it retreated with its strange gait. 4 hours after Moreno's second sighting, the events reached their terrifying culmination. Loveold Rodriguez, a delivery driver, was found dazed and confused in his lorry after delivering sheet metal. He recounted that as he was preparing to leave the site, his cab was instantly filled with a sudden, overwhelming white light. He saw a massive shadow pass his window, so tall he could not see its head. In the next moment, the entire electrical infrastructure around him failed. The lorry's engine stalled, all surrounding streetlights snapped into darkness. Like Moreno, he felt an excruciating, sharp buzzing inside his skull. When he tried to move, he realized his arms and legs were utterly unresponsive. He was completely paralyzed. A deep, continuous rumbling sound began, vibrating through his very bones, and his truck began to shake violently, objects falling from the dashboard. Through the windscreen, he saw the source of the only illumination, a round, luminous object held by the towering figure, which was now moving directly in front of his vehicle. Rodriguez's description finalized the collective testimony. The pale, muscular build, the rigid limbs, and the distinctive rocking gait, the legs barely bending at the knee, as if the entity were moving on a hidden rail system. The figure moved away and dissolved into the night. The street lamps in his lorry lights spontaneously returned to life. Yet, Rodriguez remained frozen, a bewildered witness to a total systemic and sensory failure orchestrated by a silent, massive sentinel. The persistent theory that these men were the victims of an elaborate corporate hoax disintegrates under the weight of the physical evidence. To maintain this theory, one must propose that a team of mere pranksters accomplished feats of localized physics that exceed even today's most sophisticated military laboratories. A man in a costume cannot simultaneously generate a highly focused electromagnetic pulse, EMP, strong enough to simultaneously stall the engines of two separate vehicles and extinguish the grid-powered streetlights. Nor can a simple suit induce permanent magnetization in a sensitive mechanical watch, a phenomenon that requires immense controlled magnetic flux. Furthermore, the hoax theory utterly fails to account for the precision of the physiological assault. The forced, localized paralysis, a state of temporary forced immobility experienced by both Moreno and Rodriguez, the acute migraines and heat in Merlo, and the pervasive sensory attacks. These are not theatrical side effects. They are consistent clinical symptoms of exposure to an intense, targeted energy field. The consistent presence of the whirring noise, the electrical failures, and the magnetism form the basis of the electromagnetic hypothesis. The entity appears to generate a localized high-intensity electromagnetic field, EMF, around itself. This field, likely the source of the turbine sound and the acrid smell of ionized air or ozone, directly explains the disruption of vehicle engines, a process known as EMP induction, and the magnetization of Moreno's steel watch components. More chillingly, the high-intensity EMF could simultaneously induce the intense cranial buzzing, or tinnitus, by directly disrupting the sensitive electrical signals in the inner ear and the auditory cortex. Crucially, this high-energy field could cause paralysis by overwhelming the low-voltage bioelectrical signals that control the human nervous system and muscle movement. The paralysis was therefore not a psychological freeze, but a calculated physical neuroinhibition enforced by the entity's magnetic presence. The rectangular indentations and the residual heat observed by Moreno further confirmed that a localized, powerful, energetic mass was present, a measurable signature left by a force that truly does not belong on this plane of existence. The most baffling and defiant element of the Santa Isabel case is the temporal distortion. The unaccounted minutes in the experiences of both Merlo, nearly an hour, and Moreno, 17 minutes, cannot be dismissed as a simple memory lapse. This suggests a localized manipulation of the observer's subjective experience of time, or perhaps a more profound event, the creation of a temporary chronesthesia anomaly. Under this theory, the entity's high-energy field does not just manipulate electromagnetism, but also warps the local space-time fabric relative to the witnesses. The missing time represents the interval during which the entity was actively processing, observing, or interacting with its environment, an interval that the human mind was prevented from recording or even participating in. The stoppage of Moreno's watch at the exact moment the entity initiated its field is a tangible clock-based marker of this phenomenon, suggesting that the entity can momentarily pause or severely compress the local flow of time for its immediate observers. This transcends technology and borders on mastery over fundamental physical constants. If we accept the technological or extraterrestrial origin, the entity functions less like a curious tourist and more like a sentinel or an active observer. Its movements, rigid, calculated, almost mechanical, echo high strangeness reports involving robotic or biomechanical beings encountered worldwide. The Santa Isabel Entity appeared to be performing a highly focused survey, utilizing its high-energy field as a systematic tool to measure, interfere, and then erase the event from the standard temporal record. The use of intense physiological trauma, the migraines, the heat, the paralysis, raises a darker question. Was this trauma merely an unavoidable byproduct of its energy usage, a form of radiation sickness from the high EMF? Or was the psychological horror a deliberate element of the encounter, designed to inflict a permanent deterrent, ensuring the witnesses remained silent, traumatized, and reluctant to ever speak of the incident again? The memory of the event itself becomes the instrument of control. The true, long-term horror of the Santa Isabel case resides in the psychological toll. Merlo, Moreno, and Rodriguez were not just witnesses. They were victims of a deliberate sensory and neurological violation. The entity stripped them of their physical control, their orientation in time, and their ability to rationalize the world. For Moreno, the trauma manifested in sleep, talking about a metal man, an intrusion of the unexplained into his most vulnerable mental state. For Merlo, the lost time remains a literal gap in his life narrative, a terrifying acknowledgement that his consciousness can be simply turned off and restarted at the will of an external force. Even if the physical symptoms faded, the core psychological terror, the understanding that an enormous, pale, mechanical intelligence could render them helpless, steal their time, and manipulate the very forces of nature, left an indelible mark. The entity vanished, but the defiance of reality it engineered remains, proving that the world of the mundane can be breached by forces utterly indifferent to human sanity or survival. The industrial complex returned to its normal, functional hum, but the silence of the machine was forever tainted by the memory of the geometry of dread that walked its empty roads, the sheer unprecedented volume of evidence, the total system failure, the magnetism, the paralysis, and the temporal theft demands continuous, rigorous analysis. If you possess specialized knowledge in areas such as directed energy weapons, the neurological effects of targeted EMF fields, theories of localized space-time distortion, or the historical context of high strangeness, reports concerning chronesthesia, your expert input is absolutely crucial to solving the mystery of the Santa Isabel Entity. We must understand how this phenomenon achieved the impossible. Share this rigorous, detailed analysis with your networks, your scientific colleagues, and anyone dedicated to the study of unexplained phenomena. Leave your most informed, analytical, or terrifying theoretical framework in the comments below. We are committed to completing this definitive file on the unexplained. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell to track our ongoing investigation into what truly defies all terrestrial physics.